Alright, now, this was certainly an interesting weekend, but I'll cover that later. I already had something planned for today, so that's what I'm going to cover. With noting, I won't be making a video tomorrow because I've got a flight to head back to college, so no video tomorrow, apologies in advance. So, instead, let's examine liberalism this time, and I'll make my proposal for them like I did with the other three beliefs I analyzed. So first, what is liberalism? Let's ask this honestly and not like an American, and I say that as one myself. So, basically, it's an Enlightenment ideology based on the principles of liberty, equality, and brotherhood. This is best amplified, or rather amplified, by France, whose motto is Liberté, Égalité et Fraternité. But I butchered that, don't care. But those are the three main beliefs of the liberal. Now, brotherhood depends on the group. For example, nationalism, as you know, or as you know it, comes from the liberals. That may sound weird considering a lot of liberals are rejecting nationalism right now, but it is true. The first major nationalist movements were carried by liberals. For example, Germany. You know where it got its famous tricolor from? It got it from a liberal revolution in 1848. Similar happened in France. The French Revolution was a liberal revolution, and it's where they got their iconic tricolor from. This is just a reality. Liberals are, first and foremost, the inventors of our modern concepts of equality of the citizens, nationalism, and, of course, freedom in the sense that we think of it now, with both negative and positive liberty, which they subscribe to both, of which I don't believe one is even worthy of calling liberty, but still. Liberals are not just people to the left. No. Liberals fundamentally believe in liberty, equality, and brotherhood. They hold this to their core. What they classify as their brothers depends, of course. In fact, this may sound weird, but conservatives in the United States are liberals, by and large, because they believe in a specific type of equality. Equality of opportunity, they believe in liberty from the federal government, and they believe in the brotherhood of people of the United States, often with American nationalism. So, yeah, our conservatives, by and large, are still liberals. If you're looking elsewhere, that isn't the case, but it is true here in the United States. Meanwhile, our liberals, although also taken from liberalism, instead emphasize brotherhood in terms of a more international scale, equality of outcome by and large, especially if you look at affirmative action, because if someone's playing to the argument of, well, there's more people of this group than this group getting something, clearly there must be discrimination, not only is it fallacious, it is actively arguing for equality of outcomes by percentage. Since if there's a disparate impact, then the way to fix it being to, encourage one group over another is trying to make an equality of outcome. And of course they believe in liberty, just positive liberty by and large. Funding people so that they don't have to worry about paying for something, and just a lot of other things involving social programs. Will it work? In my opinion, should be fairly obvious, especially given my stances on our budget. But now that we've gone over what they are and given a few examples, let's make a proposal. How should the liberals govern and act in order to ensure they continue their domination? Because the liberals are dominant. There is no question. In the West especially, they sweep the board. But given how much that's waning, with right-wing populists taking a lot of influence in recent years, how do they manage this? Well, number one, consolidate. Find a place and stand there. For many years, they, through ideals alone, changed their position constantly. First it was just gay marriage, then trans rights, then trans children, and so on. Now one may argue that some held on to all three at the beginning, and maybe some did, but the vast majority were not. Some barely even accepted gay marriage. Obama, for example, did not support gay marriage at first. It took time for them to get there. But importantly, they did not have the same justifications and plans with everyone else. Every other liberal was making a different argument, and so they fractured, and naturally that led to inconsistency when they were forced to defend each other's positions. Consolidate your story. Make a single, solid idea of what is right and what is wrong. If you can do that, you can push from there. Now, the liberals do have their main beliefs, but the issue comes when they clash. For example, if someone believes in liberty to the utmost, discrimination is allowed. I do not have to associate with you, you don't have to associate with me under freedom of association. But that is discrimination. That is not equality, fundamentally. And so if a liberal focuses more on equality than liberty, well then, they must make laws regarding that and restrain liberty in order to promote equality. There are limits to where these three can go, assuming you want them to, not contradict each other. And so drawing those lines early on and deciding, okay, here's how far liberty goes, equality, brotherhood, figuring out that will allow for a solid story without, complications from constantly infighting. Because if you can't draw the line, well then, you're just going to fracture. Because there are indeed people who would argue, yes, discrimination should be allowed because it is your right to do so as a free person. There are others who would argue instead that no, equality is of utmost importance, and so no matter what liberty you think you want, equality comes first. And then there are those who say, what matters is brotherhood and unity. Anything else that compromises that needs to be shut down. Consolidation is very important, especially for a disparate ideology like liberalism, which has expanded so much that it is fractured into many different ideas and belief systems under it. A national liberal and a classical liberal are not the same as a modern liberal or a neoliberal. They are all different, with different beliefs and different understandings of what is right and wrong. 2. Drop morality, not as a sense of abandoning morals entirely, but drop morality in argument. You can pearl clutch all you want, but it means nothing. Do you think, honestly, the right cares about your morals? No, they don't. I know for a fact you don't care about mine, or anyone else's. No one is going to bat an eye if someone rejects you outright by making a moral argument. Because fundamentally, morals aren't what governs a nation. They aren't what governs a country. No one is going to care about your moral stances if all they see is failure. That is reality. The right at least has something outside of morals that they argue to. They say, hey, you're at least being governed by people of you. America being governed by Americans. The UK being governed by Englishmen, or Scots, or Welsh, etc. That argument is not moral, inherently. It's tribalistic. But tribalism speaks to most people. Morality is not the case, because fundamentally we have different morals. An Indian, an American, a Frenchman, Chinese, Japanese, etc. All of them have different moral stances and codes, not only based on culture and location, but also just individual choice. 2 Americans are not going to be the same morally. They don't care about your morals, especially in recent years with polarization increasing, because to the right, the left looks like a bunch of moralizing idiots. And the liberals, as the people trying to hold everything together, the people on the center and left who are saying, hey, no, we are not doing that for moral reasons, it looks weak. vacillating, and utterly pathetic. They don't care. The right is not interested in your morals. They are interested in you doing the right thing. But that doesn't mean you should abolish morality entirely. Instead, be moral. You want to get a leg up on someone? Be moral. We can safely say most people aren't doing that, but it's still nice to do. Because sure, it's one thing to moralize. Indeed, that is a stupid idea. But at least it can be respected if a person is actually moral. If you see a person with nothing but the clothes on his back walk around proselytizing to people and doing his own thing without hurting anyone and being an upright, standing person, there's a certain level of respect that comes from a person who genuinely believes what they say. If someone instead preaches about morality, this is right, this is wrong, yada yada yada, and then breaks it, they look like a hypocrite. They really are a hypocrite. And no one's going to care what they say. No one. You might hear a few people who say, oh, maybe he had a few points, but most people are just going to write him off. Yeah, it's fallacious reasoning to just write someone off because they were immoral, but it makes sense to a person who just saw a hypocrite, because why should we care what a hypocrite says? If they're not going to follow their own reasoning, why should we? They're not rationally thinking about the argument made. They're just saying, this person's moralizing, they don't have morals, not interested. Another thing, you have to pick. There can be no equality without some divine argument. And I mean this entirely seriously. Study twins and you'll learn, yes, they have a lot in common. In fact, people related by blood have a lot in common outside of just their looks. But they're still different. They still don't achieve the same, they still don't get the same results. Reality is that people are different. Diverse, as the left might say. And tell me, if people are constantly different, do you not think those differences could add up to something important? A difference in ability, skill, maybe, hypothetically, a difference in how long they can live, or how strong they can be, how tall they are. Do you not think that'll play any role? Who am I kidding? It will. And those things all impact one's abilities, one's capability to do something important. And thus, equality is a myth, so long as it relies on purely material factors. Because by material factors, no one is equal. No one. I am not equal to you. You are not equal to me. My parents are not equal to me or you. They're their own thing, fundamentally. We're all different, diverse. That means we are not equal. We cannot be equal unless, and here's the important part, unless there's some divine spark, some supernatural justification. If there is a God that created us all and basically said, you are all my children, you are all my equals, or rather equal to each other, that could work. It cannot work on purely material factors because fundamentally, reality states and shows that people are different. And if people are different, they are unequal. They are fundamentally not the same exactly. And so equity, by extension, can never be fully achieved. Inequality can never be achieved at all. So you must pick. If you want to cling on to this equality of yours, truly cling on to it. Say, we're all equal. We all deserve the same things. Okay. What God? What spirits? What belief system justifies that? Because results certainly don't. When we treat everyone as an equal, some people will get freaking angry and do stupid things. Others do stupid things anyways, even if you don't. So even if we ignore those that just do stupid things anyways, when trying to put into a state of equality, those people who reject it, or those who take advantage of it, are people that we wouldn't have to deal with if we didn't say that we are unequal in that exact situation. Sure, they're probably going to still be somewhere if we said, no, we're not equal. You guys actually do something. You guys actually behave. We could try that. We could really do. But the issue is, when you try to treat people as equals, there are going to be those who chafe. There are going to be those that take advantage. And if we do that without saying there's a God, if we do it with purely material factors, it is going to find itself to be false. And building an idea, a government, on false pretenses is like building a castle on sand. The sand will fall away. The castle will go down. It will not function. A society built on sand and lies is just another part of the desert, not a government. And so pick. Do you justify things with religion? Or do you admit that equality is a lie? Choose. It's up to you. And of course, one more thing, which is more relevant than ever given the things that happened over the weekend. Do not assume rules. People are different, as stated earlier. But also, they aren't just going to follow things because a piece of paper said to. No one cares what the UN Human Rights Charter says. If everyone's violating it, no one's going to bat an eye. Do you think people are going to say, oh yes, the UN's human rights is totally legitimate, when North Korea, of all people, is in the UN and supposed to be following it, yet we can see from the skies themselves that they are not? Or Persia, or Iraq. Do you think they are? Do you honestly think they care? No. That legalese that you have written down on a contract means nothing if someone's willing to put a bullet in your skull to avoid it. And if you're not willing to respond, well, then guess what? You're dead. Fundamentally, you must understand that rules mean nothing without force. A rule without force cannot be achieved as an 100% enforced thing because, well, enforcement requires force. You want results? You need force. Especially in societies that are very diverse and mixed. Because when people get grudges, they tend to act on them. And the best way to discourage them from acting is punishment. Because people, when they aren't thinking rationally and are thinking emotionally, they go down to lower reasons of thinking, good and evil. Do I get hurt? Do I not? Do I get rewards? They don't think in terms of, yes, the social contract says this. They don't care. They aren't thinking with that higher order of reasoning. Heck, most people don't even think in terms of a social contract or objective truth. They just think, all right, my community says this, the law says this, and I want to be safe. How do I do that? They think communally. Or they think selfishly without any nuance. You aren't going to find people who care about rules just because they exist. You're going to find people who will take advantage of what they can. And so without force, your rules mean nothing. Do not assume rules, and do not assume they mean anything. The UN is one of the most useless organizations we have ever seen on this planet. I don't mean to be rude. I kind of do, honestly. But it is one of the most useless organizations in terms of actually helping people. It's not League of Nations bad, but it is really bad. I'll get into it later, I'm sure. But those rules that people love to cite when someone does something they don't like, they don't mean anything. Not because they don't have good intentions, or because someone out there might want to enforce them, but because they just don't have the strength to. North Korea kills 100 people because they're bored. Alright? What's your retaliation when they have nukes? The United States recently just kidnapped the leader of Venezuela because he was being annoying. Alright? What you gonna do? Good luck. You're not gonna be able to actually do anything if you can't have the people to enforce it or the methods. Fundamentally. So do not assume your rules mean anything to anyone outside, or that they exist as a practical thing. Legalese is one of the worst arguments to make because if you're saying, oh, well, this thing here says this, but the reality is something different, well then, you're not going to solve the problem because if you ignore reality and focus just on what's written, things aren't going to end too well. Because those who work in reality have a good chance of winning. And then also, this is just a personal thing, but acknowledge your roots. So often I hear people talking about liberalism and all the freeing it did. Meanwhile, all I can remember is the first successful liberal revolution in Europe was the one where everyone got their heads cut off. Yeah, liberalism is not pretty. It's not something that just works. In fact, it was one that got taken over by a freaking dictator. That is the root of liberalism. Those ideas of those philosophers during the Enlightenment who thought, we know human nature better than everyone else. Here's our plans. Here's what we believe. Here's how humanity can run itself properly. Could be enlightened absolutists. Could be people who instead favor basic anarchy. Looking at you, Rousseau. And what do we see? When actually tried, it results in one of the bloodiest wars for the time. Excluding China, of course, because freaking China had so many deaths, it's honestly insane in their civil wars. But of Europe, and even of Africa, the Napoleonic Wars and the Revolution were some of the bloodiest wars ever fought up to that point. Millions died. All because liberalism took control of a country and it led to them getting on a warpath. They straight up declared war first in several instances. And even when they didn't, they aggressively set up puppet states. That's not something you typically associate with a freeing movement. Now, I'm not about to object to this on the grounds of I don't like puppets, just hypocrisy mainly. But the fact is, liberalism's roots are not pretty. They involve a lot of bloodshed and a lot of oppression. So the idea that somehow liberalism isn't capable of this, that it's somehow the peaceful one of the three main children of the Enlightenment, the other two being socialism and fascism, is absurd. You, liberals as a whole, not specifically you, but just as a general speaking to this group, have done some of the worst atrocities in human history. Socialism and fascism beat you, but not by much. In terms of just sheer casualties, it's honestly insane. You are not some peaceful ideology. Stop pretending you are, or that somehow you are above the others. You're more efficient. That's it. You're definitely not more moral. I'll leave that as it is. Have a good one. Goodbye.